That's lovely.
Well, what is this?
All right, so today's seminar, Discourse on the Method of Rightly Conducting the Reason in Seeking for Truth in the Sciences, done by Rene Descartes. So get out your sheet, get out your guided reading. All right, so let's fill in the blanks here now. So, overview of Descartes' life and accomplishments. Go.
He was came from a lower noble status.
Good. He was part of the lesser nobility. When did he live?
He was born
He was born in
1596.
Yeah, so 1600s, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Which country was he from?
She's from France.
He's from France, right? Oh, you need a
Good
picture.
name.
You gotta have a picture. Okay. Now, to me, I always like, hey, that's Descartes. When you see his picture, here we go. Scroll up, right?
What's the right one?
Here we go. This is probably the classical one right there within black and white. Got the big high collar, got the long hair, got the mustache. To me, he looks like what? He looks like a musketeer to me.
Oh yeah.
Look at musketeer.
No.
Yeah. I see
Or like here looks like Captain Hook
Yeah.
from Peter Pan, right? Yeah. So some of these pictures aren't very flattering. There's a good one right there. Okay. So Rene Descartes. So he's from the lesser nobility. What does that mean?
Means the ability that like say like the upper middle class in a sense.
In a sense, this is France, 1600s. What kind of a government does France have?
Absolute monarchy.
An absolute monarchy. In fact, I'm glad you guys put absolute on there, because what is implied in that? It is.
Absolute power.
Yeah. What's the idea of the philosophy behind the monarchy at this point?
One person rules.
Oh, there's something. Right of kings.
Divine.
The sun.
The divine right of kings, right? In other words, the king has the authority as coming down from God to make the decisions, right? And so the king isn't simply the ruler that manages all the affairs of France. The king has people under him, hierarchical-wise, to do what? To govern. These would be the what? The king's like assistants. Yes. What do you call these people? What do you call the people that are beneath the king that rule and govern?
Nobles.
The nobles. Good. So Descartes coming from what kind of a family? Lesser nobility, right? So he's a minor noble from his family. Okay. So what does that provide him with?
Education.
Provides him with money, right? Education. So he's got, did you read in there that the very first paragraph of the bio says that he had a lifelong income from the property that his mother left him, right? So does he have to work to earn a living? No. In fact, he thanks God for that later on, says he doesn't have to make a merchandise of himself. Okay? But he's also part of the nobility. So along with the wealth and privilege comes responsibility. What was Descartes' responsibility? What did he have to do in return? What was his job? No, I mean he was educated, but that wasn't his job that he had to do. What? What was his job? No, he did that for fun. Yeah.
Aid the king.
What?
Aid the king.
In what?
Whatever you need, like duties or whatever.
Like, give me specifics. What was his job title? Do you guys know? Because what was it? What did he have to do? What was his responsibility? What? Well, he went to school to become a lawyer. Yes, that should be in your bio. Earned a law degree by age of 20. But what was his duty? What did
Philosopher?
Well, that was what he chose to do with his life.
Oh, he was entrusted responsible for father's DNA.
Well, that's true, but that wasn't what his job was with regard to his family title. Does it say anything there about what he did with his family title? What he was supposed to do? What? Ladies and gentlemen, He didn't have to do anything.
Oh.
Okay? He was a younger son. Usually these inheritance things go to the older sons, right? So the older son has the duty to carry on the family dukeship or whatever he was supposed to be. He didn't have to do anything. So here he's got the means of being independently wealthy for the rest of his life, and he's got really no obligations that go along with it. What would you do? That's the temptation, right? Right? What would you do if you were independently wealthy and didn't have any obligations to maintain the family business or something like that?
Waste of money.
Look, what is this?
What is that?
They
get ready.
Shopping. Hang on a second here. Is that what Descartes does?
No.
No.
All day.
Have you guys ever heard the phrase a trust fund, baby?
Yeah.
Kind of.
No?
That's like where you just go off like.
No, go ahead.
Do whatever you want.
Hey, Jake,
Yeah,
Jake,
mention it
let me
once.
manage the
You got
question.
it.
Thanks. Go ahead.
So it's like when you're born with like a lot of money, it's
Yeah.
kind of like great life that you don't like that you're just gonna live off that money. You don't have to like work on your money.
But do your parents just give it to you like
no,
a big
you
lump
have to,
sum?
like, get it. Is it when you're 18, I think, or is it when you like it's like a weird like?
It depends.
What possessions?
Okay, the idea of a trust means that you're going to put it into it's a legal trust, basically, which means there's somebody else in charge of the money, not the person that gets it. And then you get it maybe a little bit every month, or you have to wait till you're 18 to get it, or 21 to get it. Some people say you have to go off and get a college degree, whatever, however the trust is set up. Because what you don't want to have happen is a young person to suddenly come into a lot of money, and then what?
Waste it all.
And then become like the next Justin Bieber or something like
Like
that.
the
Oh,
Kardashians.
no.
The Kardashians. Okay. Yeah, so he kind of was, and the reason they're called trust fund babies is because
They haven't worked.
They're born with it.
yeah, they're kind of baby. They kind of have a hard time growing up, right? What do they do with their lives? Well,
They have a great life.
what do they? Yeah, but what do you mean? What do they do with it?
They play
They
around.
spend their life doing what?
Getting ready for the.
Doing what they want.
Yeah, entertaining themselves, right? Descartes could have had that life. Maybe you and I would be tempted to do that. I'm sure he was tempted as well, but he doesn't. So he goes off to school. He gets his degree. What else did he do? We talked about a little bit of it.
He traveled.
He traveled a lot. How did he travel? There was a means by which he first started to travel. Yep.
Was the military?
It was. What did he do?
Join the army.
What army? France?
Army of Prince Maurice.
Holland.
In Holland. He goes and joins.
Right here, right here.
People in Holland are called
Hollanders.
Dutch.
No.
Dutch. He goes down and he joins the Dutch army. Basically, he hires himself as a gentleman officer. What would we call that today? If somebody, a hired soldier for money?
Mercenary.
A mercenary. Although the connotations aren't the same then as they were now. But he hires himself out. Well, kind of. So then he goes and he joins the German army. So he's traveling around.
He said he hated to be settled in one place.
He did. He liked to move around a bit. There was this particular event that happened in his life. Actually took place over 3 nights. What were they? Did you pick up on that? November 10th, I think the date was such and such.
No idea.
No, it wasn't it.
Where he has the dreams.
He has the what?
The dreams.
He has the dreams. Did you guys pick up on that? He's got 3 nights in a row where he has these visions. And they weren't just dreams like he ate a bad piece of pizza and he's got a stomach ache and so he's got strange dreams. I mean, these were profound dreams, like visions, in which he says the spirit of truth came and gave him this new science, which is what he's writing about now. This is where this comes from. Isn't that interesting? Talk to me else about what else did he have unique in his life regarding sleep?
No, he woke up at the same time.
What time?
12?
When did he get up?
Because he got to stay in the bed later.
Yeah, he had poor health, right? So it said his professor let him do what?
Sleep in.
Sleep in late, so he wouldn't get up until late. And it's a habit that he kept with him his whole life. I thought maybe as high school students, you appreciate that. Yeah, get to sleep in late, not have to start your studies till, late morning, early afternoon or so forth. What happened later on in life?
He went to Holland.
He went to,
Retired to Holland.
who hires him in the end? The Queen of
Holland.
Sweden.
The Queen of Sweden, right?
Wanted her.
And she wants him to be her personal tutor. I want you to be my personal teacher. Teach me all this philosophy thing. Like, well, what does she require that you do?
Wake up early.
What time?
5.
Yeah, they start the lessons at 5 in the morning. And he's in his 50s now at this point. Can you imagine all your life having the habit of not getting up early at all, staying in bed late, and then as a part of your new job, you have to meet with the queen at 5 in the morning. What time do you have to get up in order to meet with the queen at 5?
Like
Only
4.
4.
I don't know, sometime before 5, right?
4:25.
And what happens to him?
We died.
He gets sick and he dies. I don't know. Somehow I find that ironic, something. I don't know. If you ever wanted the opportunity, though, to convince your parents to let you sleep in late, this would be your chance, right?
Yep.
Hey, look at Descartes. Parent, he was allowed to sleep in late most of his life, and it was only when he was required to get up at 5 in the morning he got sick and died. I don't know. I found that a bit ironic. Okay, so now, publishes books. Actually, he was reluctant to publish at first, right? Why was he convinced to go ahead and publish his ideas?
Because his professor wanted him, when he asked his professor to read his books, and they said, why are you hiding this, show them to the world?
Yeah, why? Yeah, that's good. Why does the world need to know?
That part of it, that part of it.
No, you got it. You laid your hand on it. His professor says, you can't hide this. This is so good. You know an obligation to mankind to publish your work here.
Oh yeah, he felt immoral to hide it.
Right, right. He felt it was immoral to hide this now from people. Okay, so going on to question number 1 now. Question number 2. What does Descartes say about mankind having good reason or sense? Let's jump into this.
It's long, but it's so good.
There's someone looking through the window.
Oh no, we're gonna ignore them. Okay. Very first sentence. Somebody read that to me.
The first good sense is of all things in the world, the most equally distributed, for everybody thinks himself so abundantly provided with it, that even those most difficult to please in all other matters do not commonly desire more of it than that they already possess.
Yeah, good sense. Everybody's got good sense. Good sense is distributed equally among all people. And I have to admit, at first when I read this, I thought he was being sarcastic. It's like, what? Because he's saying here, people never say, I don't have enough good sense, I'd like more. But does he believe that good sense is equally distributed among all people? Yes? No?
Yes.
Yeah.
Probably not.
Right? Here we go.
It is somewhere.
Let's see here. The power of forming a good judgment and of distinguishing the true from the false, which is properly speaking what is called good sense or reason, is by nature
Equal.
In
All men.
all men. Now he doesn't mean like man just like males, he means like people, right? Man in the anthropomorphic sense of being human. Alright. So, what do you think about that? Do you agree or disagree? Does everybody have good sense?
They have
Not really.
Not really?
Nope.
Some more than others.
Some more than others? That's not what Descartes says. Descartes says everybody has equal amounts of good sense.
Well, maybe
Like,
they
you don't
start
know
out
about
having
good
good
sense.
sense.
They
and
don't
then,
know
like,
they have a good sense.
lower. So.
They do have they
think about things
It's
differently.
just that
He says that. They think about things.
Like they don't put certain things into consideration
So,
when they think through a
Voila.
process.
is Descartes saying that everybody makes the right decisions?
no.
No. Does he say that everybody has the ability to make the right decisions?
Yes.
Oh, there's a difference then, right? Now, I don't know. How many of you agree that everybody at least has the ability to make the right decisions? Anybody disagree? Like some people just can't make the right decision. Some people don't know right from wrong or true from false, or can't know right from wrong, can't know true from false. Alexa, what do you think?
Pistons fan.
You don't know? Well, okay, why does he say then that people still make bad decisions? Yeah, James?
Biases, right? Like their personal views get in the way.
Yeah, or opinions or the way they want things to be. What else, Nick?
Because they don't apply reason to it sometimes.
Yeah, isn't that what he says here? Hang on, let me find it here.
It's in the-
Right, on the British one or on
Next
our
one?
sample of the British spices as well as British.
Yeah, I'll read it to you, Mr. Marsh.
Oh, go ahead, read it to me.
People still make errors because good sense is not applied well sometimes. Well,
Is that what it said? Is that a quote?
yep.
Okay, so let me see here. It says, it will show that the diversity of our opinion does not proceed from some men being more rational than others, but solely from the fact that our thoughts pass through diverse channels, which is what Jay said. They think about things differently, either based upon their experiences or something like that. And the same objects are not considered by all. We don't always consider this the right ideas. So he says, oh, there's one of these where he talks about applying it well. He does say this here. People say he's arrogant, but he says here, I've never ventured to presume that my mind was any ways more perfect than that of an ordinary man. Okay? So, the question then is, why do people still make bad choices? How do you then uncover the right way of thinking? Yeah, Mark?
I have it on like the last couple of sentences.
Mhm.
What it says, the British mind are capable of the British vices as well as British virtue.
Oh yeah,
And
that's
those who
good.
proceed slowly may provide that they will follow the straight road, really advance much faster than those, though they run for thinking it.
Yeah, so he's saying it, sometimes it takes some people a little longer than others to come to the right conclusion, but in the end, everybody has the capacity to come to the right conclusion. Just because somebody has a good mind, does that mean that they're always going to be right?
No.
Okay, good. So, next question then. What does Descartes say is the only thing that distinguishes mankind from brutes?
Good reason.
So reason, the ability to reason.
The ability to reason. Did you find that right here? That's
Yes.
right there.
Easy.
For as to reason or sense, inasmuch as it is the only thing, and he says this here, only thing that constitutes us men and distinguishes us from brutes, I would fain believe is to be found complete in each individual. Do you agree with that or not?
I feel like there's other stuff like too. It's not just
Yeah.
like that's the only thing that's like.
Well, he does. He makes an exclusive claim. He says reason, or the ability to think, the ability to do logic, as it were, is what makes people different from animals. You don't think so? You think there's more, or you think that we are the same?
No, I think there's like more things that are different.
Like what?
Thumbs.
Thumbs?
I mean,
Well, monkeys have thumbs. In fact, they've got them on their feet too.
Well,
So,
I thought shepherd.
Taylor?
I don't know, like.
Max?
I think there are two things like the ability to reason and the ability to feel emotion.
No, I think
So animals don't feel emotion?
I think they
No, they
do.
don't.
I
Really
feel
Because you're
emotion.
talking to
Okay, so they don't, he says they don't feel the same emotion as we do. What emotions do we feel that they don't?
I mean, we feel complex emotions than animals.
But that's not a measure of either or, that's just a measure of by degree. That's not something that's a fundamental difference. Do you understand the difference? Do you understand what I'm saying here? There's a question of, well, we just have more of something than animals versus we have something that animals categorically don't have.
I think animals.
But we don't know if
are
animals
first
emotion.
order.
Do we have, does our having emotions, is that something categorically that animals don't have?
I feel like sometimes animals have
Hang on,
emotions.
I'm talking to Max. Max?
What, I think, no, animals don't have emotions. They have instinct but not emotions.
So, maybe this is an interesting point to make. Peter? How are we defining the terms then? Because Max said they have instincts but not emotions. I would think maybe some people would think they're the same thing.
We are,
I
yeah,
think
we do,
animals
we have
can
instincts
reason.
as well.
You think animals can
Animals
reason?
have
I feel that, yeah.
Like,
Yeah,
if you,
they have to
no, animals are smart, like,
Yeah, it's
Like us?
It's like
Those
an
don't
animal.
know.
Maybe the dolphins go to the moon.
No, but monkeys went.
Because they don't, but we have a higher capacity.
They have thumbs.
Those are pretty
Thumbs.
They have thumbs.
Monkeys
What if
went.
they have
Yeah, monkeys.
dog, you put a bowl on the ground, you'll be like, okay,
Yeah.
a bowl on the ground, it must have like.
No, they smell the food.
All right, time out.
Yeah.
Time out. I will wait.
We can reason.
Okay. Max brings up a good point here. That's a point I want to emphasize. Too oftentimes people argue about things. Yes, they do. No, they don't. But they argue about different things, but they think they're arguing about the same thing. So I like your use of the word instinct because that brings up the question of what do you really mean by emotion? So it's important for us to define our terms, right? What do we mean by emotions? Well, Max, by saying instinct, that kind of changes the debate a little bit because by instinct you say they don't have any control over them. Is that what you mean?
Yeah.
But do we have control over our emotions?
Not control, but we know that we feel emotions. They don't.
You can't control it.
How do we know that? How do we know that dogs don't feel the same emotions that we do?
We think it's
Because
they're
Then you can't say that as reason. It's like, if you say we don't know what, like, we have to say that we know that we.
Next question.
Do you have a dog?
Yes, will it?
No.
The next question then is maybe we ought to define what reason is. Because if we're saying that reason's the only thing that separates us from brutes, maybe we ought to define what reason is. You guys know how to do an essential definition?
Easy.
Do you? What, a definition, to be a good definition, to be an essential definition, you have to kind of give the group that it's a part of and explain how it's different from the other things in that group. Okay, usually it involves a genus and a species. You guys know about genus and species from biology, right?
No.
Okay, so the genus is the large group that it's in. The species is the thing that makes it different from everything else that's in there. Okay, so now according to how Descartes defines man, what is man? Man is a what? What's the genus? What's the overall category? Man's an animal.
We're gorillas.
As opposed to a mineral or a vegetable or something like that, right? Okay, but how is man different from all the other animals? Descartes says man has reason. Okay, that would be like an essential definition. And Plato, I think, said the same thing. Man is a rational animal. What about a table? Let's just do something real simple.
A table?
What's the genus of a table?
Object.
What is? No, there's.
It's a material.
Does it have
Not
to
all
be?
tables are
Or
wood.
is that just accidental?
Material.
Material.
Hannah. Furniture.
Ooh.
Good. And now you have to tell me how it's different from every other piece of furniture. And this is where it can get a little tricky. How would you say it's different from another piece of furniture? Well, my stool has 4 legs.
Chairs come to it.
It's made of wood.
It's used.
No.
It's used.
You
What is
can
it
get a-
used?
It's to
made of wood.
Support.
Chairs
Put objects.
come to
Put
it.
objects,
But you can
No,
put
we don't
objects.
But that's not, it's
Usage.
It's
that's not its purpose though.
Yeah.
Flat surface,
It's possible.
eat on it.
We're not going to really pursue this, but I
You
want
don't
you
want
to
Yeah.
time out. I want you to think. Would you call this a table?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It can be.
No.
That's a
I mean,
stool.
That's a stool.
That's a stool.
This is, you wouldn't call this a table.
Well, one person can fit.
Would you call this a stool?
No.
Okay, I want you to think about how you would explain the
But
The shape of
fundamental
it.
difference
You could
between them.
still
I can't have a
do
round table?
Well, you can, but that's
It's
size
right.
of
large diameter.
Yeah.
All the things
Where you
that
eat it.
would make it
Like a
together,
Metaphysics.
like the size and stuff.
Okay, circle it up here. Circle it up here.
just the color of
Tables have to be big.
All the pieces that put together make a table.
We can't
See what I'm
define
saying?
rectangles and whatnot.
I think you can, but it's hard. I'm not going to get into this. That's not the point of the exercise.
Large diameter object.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we need to know what is meant really by reason. And just to jump to the chase here, when Descartes says reason, I really think he's talking about the rational, logical, deductive or inductive kind of process that goes on in the mind. Okay? Now, I wouldn't say that it's think, because we could argue that animals do think in some sense, right? I wouldn't say that it's feel, because I think animals feel in some sense. But it's this process of the mind that is able to search out for truth. I don't think animals do that. Okay? Maybe we can debate the definition of reason, but here I think that's what he's talking about. The ability of making a sound judgment, reason. Okay? Now, I'm surprised this hasn't come up already. Somebody usually always says that, oh no, there's another way that human beings are different than animals, and that is that human beings have a
Animals
Maybe language.
Like dolphins go.
Culture. Is that it?
Culture, maybe.
Behavior.
I'm thinking something a little more transcendent.
Behavior.
Passion. Oh my god.
Yeah,
Love.
Most human cultures perhaps have this idea that human beings are different from animals and that human beings possess something that animals don't possess.
Oh, a soul.
A soul, right? That's not even part of his argument here, but yeah, human beings have a soul and
Wait,
perhaps
animals have
animals
souls?
don't. They do have souls?
Yeah.
Dogs?
Of course they have souls.
All that always comes up. All dogs don't have
Fur.
No, they don't.
Get a dog.
Because they don't have a soul.
If your dog bit your leg off.
How do you know they don't have a soul?
That's a good question. Say it again, Taylor.
How do you know they don't have a soul?
How do you know?
That's not.
Well,
How do you
No.
know?
They do have a soul. Come on.
Descartes is going to propose a method by which you make a good judgment. Well, let's pursue this. Okay. Question number 4. What was the end result of Descartes' study in letters? Meaning book study, right? Yes,
He
James?
wanted to learn more. He wanted to find out more knowledge.
Well, he did want to learn, but that was not the end. That was, I would say, the beginning of it.
Change his mind?
Yeah, he did change his mind. Where does it say he changed his mind?
No clue.
Oh, find it.
Oh, c'est la vie, c'est la vie.
He changed his opinion entirely, right here.
There you go.
He went to school eager to learn. Oh yes, I finally get to go to school. That hidden knowledge that only the wealthy and the famous and the people who have means get. Oh yes, I desire to learn. Then what happened?
Change his mind.
He realized that
Go ahead.
there was no learning in the world that he was formerly led to believe.
Yeah. Did you get this part right here?
Can you repeat that, please?
That's true. There was no learning in the world as he was
He
formerly
was
led to believe.
embarrassed.
He's embarrassed by what?
Doubts and errors because the more he tries to like uncover them, then it leads to an increasing discovery of his own ignorance.
Oh yes. You ever feel that way in school? The more time you spend in school, the dumber you feel. The more you realize how uneducated you really are. I mean, admit it if you've ever felt that way in a class before. Yeah.
Yes.
I thought that would resonate with teenagers. Now, I have to tell you, his was a little perhaps more acute than yours. Because the method of schooling at that time, out of the medieval age, was the method of scholasticism. And basically what they would do, it wasn't necessarily knowledge or it wasn't philosophy, it was a means of instruction. It was a way of learning. And so, they would learn all these facts and so forth like that. And then when they got to the next level, they would teach them to defend their beliefs. They would teach them logic, and they would teach them rhetoric. And so they would actually debate the truths that were known. Well, the purpose of that wasn't to cast doubt on the beliefs. The purpose of that was to actually train you to be a good debater. And for simplicity's sake, we say the sky is blue. Isn't it? What do you mean by sky? What do you mean by blue? And is it always blue? And so they would have these,
Didn't go that far into it.
Oh, what was the classic example? How many angels can dance on the head of a pin?
What?
Looking for us as a chicken or yes.
Yeah, stuff like that. But the point wasn't necessarily to arrive at an answer, yes or no. The purpose was to teach this. I'll wait. It wasn't opinion, it was supposed to be truth. Right? So the purpose was to teach them how to defend their beliefs against attack and so forth. For Descartes, it's got the unfortunate circumstance that it actually does make him doubt everything that he thought was true. And he doesn't like that, right? So I found myself embarrassed with so many doubts and errors that it seemed to me that the effort to instruct myself had no effect other than the increasing discovery of my own ignorance. And I was studying at one of the most celebrated schools in Europe. That was kind of that scholastic method. And so Descartes gets disenfranchised with book learning. He desires to know what's true, and yet he's disappointed then in the end result of the scholastic method. So, why do you do school in the first place?
More knowledgeable.
Think about that. Okay, back page. Descartes then, but doesn't despise the school, right? He says that he was required to read all of these great books. And what was the result of reading of all good books? Or what kind of experience can we have when we read the great books of old? Yes, Sully.
It is like having a conversation with the noblest man in the world.
Yeah! Did you catch that?
Yeah.
It's like having a conversation with the best and noble people of entire human history, in which they share with us only what? Their best ideas.
That's a great conversation.
That's the great conversation.
What's
Yeah.
the most art part?
Well, that's when we come around to that. Yeah. Okay. Here's the quote for the week. I changed it if you haven't noticed.
I can't see it, Sean.
It's long, right? Oh my goodness, can't read all that.
No, I can't.
If you're patient, you might find good. Okay. Listen up, please. There is a strange idea abroad that in every subject, the ancient book should be read only by the professionals, and that the amateur should content himself with the modern books. Thus, I have found as a tutor in English literature that if the average student wants to find out something about Platonism, the very last thing he thinks of doing is to take a translation of Plato off the library shelf and read the Symposium. He would rather read some dreary modern book 10 times as long, all about isms and influences, and only once in 12 pages telling him what Plato actually said. The error is rather an amiable one, for it springs from humility. The student is half afraid to meet one of the greatest philosophers face to face. Because when you read Plato, who are you having a discussion with? Plato.
He actually talks to the cars.
Well, kind of. It's a one-way conversation, but still, you're afraid to read Plato, much like, would you walk up to the president and just introduce yourself and say, hi, let's talk? No, there's a little bit of humility here and say, well, I can't approach the president. It's like, oh, I can't approach Plato, right? So I'll read about Plato. But there's a problem with that. By the way, that was from C.S. Lewis. Instead of reading about Descartes, what are we doing now? Reading Descartes, right? Here is our chance to have a conversation with Descartes. And I find this very poetic because Descartes is talking about this kind of idea. And he says he enjoys reading good books and he thinks that's valuable because it's like a great conversation. This book that I'm holding is part of a collection of books called The Great Books of the Western World, right? You see them up on my shelf over there? I've got maybe, what's that, half dozen? Okay? There's like 50 some. The first book in the series, which is written by a man by the name of Robert Hutchins. It's called what?
Greatest books of
The-
the Western world.
The Great Conversation. Yeah, it's a collection of these books, and it changes over time. Some of the older versions have got different books than the newer versions, but it's like, oh, here's a collection of all the greatest works of the human mind throughout history. Let's read them so that we can be part of this great conversation. And I find it kind of poetic that Pascal's talking about that in the book that he wrote, which has now been included as part of that conversation. I don't know that Pascal could have gotten a higher honor than to have his book included in that conversation. I'm sorry, did I say Pascal? Dang it, I meant Descartes. I like Pascal. Well, Pascal's in it as well. Descartes. Okay. So, of all of his studies, why was Descartes delighted most with mathematics?
Provided reasons.
The certainty of its demonstrations and evidence.
The certainty of its demonstrations, right? Pascal, remember what was Pascal troubled about? He was troubled about his doubts. He didn't like that, okay? Why does he like mathematics? Because mathematics gives you certainty. Now remember the two different methods of reasoning, we've talked about this briefly before. You've got inductive reasoning, and you've got deductive reasoning. Inductive would be going from the specific observations, right, to a general conclusion, a conclusion about all. You're going from some to all. Well, you're looking around, that swan is white, and that swan is white, and look, that swan is white, and there's another swan, it's white. In fact, every swan I've ever seen is white, therefore I'm going to inductively reason that all swans are white. Okay? Are you wrong in making that conclusion?
Yes.
Are you?
No,
Depends.
all you've seen is white swans.
But there also
It depends,
there's logic.
depends on like.
Is there a possibility that there might exist a swan somewhere that you haven't seen that isn't white?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. And so at best, inductive reasoning can only give you what's probable. It never really in the end gives you something that's certain. Now, we treat these things as though they are certain, especially in the sciences, right? This electron has a charge of -1. That electron has a charge of -1. This electron has a charge of -1. Well, all electrons have a charge of -1. Might there possibly be an electron someplace that doesn't have a charge of -1? Highly unlikely, right? But can we say that with absolute certainty, at least theoretically? No, but we treat it as though we can, right? So it's a valid form of reasoning. But deductive reasoning doesn't do that. Deductive starts with the general principle, something that's true about all things, and then works its way down to the specific. Now, the problem is this. It does give you certain conclusions. When you deductively conclude something, and you've done the logic properly, it is certain, provided that your starting point was certain. Does that make sense? Do you see what I'm saying? If your starting point is certain, your conclusions are certain. The problem is, how do you find a certain starting point? We talked about this when we actually read Pascal, right? Remember Pascal's On the Geometrical Mind, where he says we like to define, geometry likes to define things. In fact, it's useful in teaching us how to define things, but there are some things that geometry can't define and shouldn't try. Remember what those things were? No? Like space and number and lines and...
Oh, primitive definition.
The primitive definitions. Good, Mario. Yeah. He says those are things that we actually take for granted as being true. Those are things that are self-evident as being true. Where have you heard that phrase self-evident before? Behold these truths to be self-evident. Yeah, the Declaration of Independence. Of all things, there's no proof offered for that. It's considered as obvious to everyone that it's true. Okay? So if those things are true, then your conclusions are true. It's taking as what's called an axiom. An axiom in geometry is something that's just understood as being true without the need for proof. And it's those things that you use to build then your other conclusions. He liked that so much because his conclusions were certain. Number 7, real quick. What was Descartes' conclusion about studying theology?
It points out the way to heaven.
It does. What was his conclusion about studying it? Hannah?
To like, in order to reveal the truths and succeed, then you needed assistance from above, and you had to be more than a man.
That was great. So what did he conclude about studying it? What was he going to do, James?
Can't understand everything without God's help very much.
So, yes, that's exactly what he's saying. So what does he conclude about studying it for himself? Is he going to study theology? No. I find that kind of sad. Descartes is essentially saying, if I can't understand everything about it, I'm not going to try to understand anything. I find that lamentable. I wonder how much good Descartes could have done in theology if he'd attempted it. But he says, you seem to have need some kind of supernatural assistance or be something different than a human being in order to study it, so he's not going to try. He's just going to leave it alone. I don't know. I think maybe even if we can't understand everything about something, we should try to understand what we can. All right, so question number 8. What did Descartes resolve to do with his life as soon as he was old enough to leave the control of his tutors?
Travel to new experiences.
That's true, but what did he do first? He quit what?
The study of letters.
He quit the study of letters. He quit the academic life. He quit school, right? He wanted to get out of the academic environment. And what did it say? He wanted to travel and to do what? He's going to search for truth. And he didn't find truth in the academic life. He wanted to find truth where?
And his experiences with travel.
Yes, and he uses a phrase I wanted you to pick up on. Where is it here? I know it was after this one. Scroll on down a little bit. Yeah, this is why as soon as age permitted me to emerge from the control of my tutors, I entirely quitted the study of letters, and resolving to seek no other science than that which can be found where? In myself, or at least in
The great book.
the great book of the world. He's giving up paperback kind of books, and he's going to study a different kind of book, the book of the world. Because he says this, he talks about a man in a different culture or someplace somewhere, whereby I might meet with much more truth in the reasonings that each man makes on the matters that specifically concern him, and the issue of which would very soon punish him if he made a wrong judgment. He says people that are in the academic world, they make decisions about stuff, but they really don't really have anything at risk involved in it. Whereas if a man in a different country, if he decides one way or a different way, he may either suffer reward or suffer punishment. Maybe he's got a different kind of method. Maybe he's got a different kind of method of determining truth. You ever heard of like Monday morning quarterbacking or armchair quarterbacking? We just watched the Super Bowl, right? How many of us from the comfort of our couch went, why did they throw the pass like that? Was dumb. Oh, couldn't you see this guy over here? I would not have made that decision. But yet, you know, we don't have a bunch of big guys with pads trying to smash our face into the ground, right? Okay, we're not under the stress of being in a high-stakes football game. We're in the comfort of our armchair. Whereas the guy on the field, he may view things differently. So Descartes goes out to see if he can find truth in other cultures and of himself. So, what does Descartes desire most in life?
To distinguish the true from false, to see clearly with his actions and with confidence.
Yeah, right there. Good job, Hannah. I always had an excessive desire to learn to distinguish the true from the false in order to see clearly in my actions and to walk with confidence in this life. He doesn't desire fame. He doesn't desire money. He doesn't even desire entertainment or comfort. What he wants to do is he wants to know, how should I live? Do you think that's worthy? Man, I do. I might propose to you that may be the only way that you really get satisfied with life. Not with things, not with stuff, not with maybe even other people, but being satisfied that you're living rightly, that you're living well. How does he do that? That's what his method's going to be. So you asked a question earlier. What's our part of the great conversation? Let's use the metaphor of a conversation. Because we're just now coming to it, right? This conversation's been going on for thousands of years. As we come to the conversation, what should we do first? Yeah? Introduce yourselves. So if two people are talking and they're having a debate, the first thing you do is you walk up and you interrupt and you say, hi, I'm so-and-so.
Hi.
Hey, what's up, background?
How would you know the background? Let's use that model. 3 or 4 people are talking and they're having a very interesting debate and you come up on it. What? Thank you, Sean. What should you do first? Listen to it for a bit, right? And that would be the same thing that you were saying, is like review it. Yeah, let's hear what they have said first. Seek first to understand and then to be, do you know the phrase?
Understood.
Then to be understood, yeah. So I don't know, what's our part? I think we ought to first listen. But then, shall we say something? I mean, what do I have to say on it? I don't know.
Depends on what you're saying.
It depends on what you're saying, yeah. Some ideas are worth listening to and others aren't. What I want to encourage you to think about is, what kind of contribution could you make to the great conversation? Because you're not above it, right? You're not below it. This is not something that's unreachable for you.
Tell me.
If Descartes is right, and all men have access to reason and good sense, then who knows what kind of original contribution you might add to the discussion. Like Descartes did. I don't think for a minute that Descartes actually thought that his would be included, but there it is. Maybe in 50 years we'll see the great book of the Western world and we haven't added a little spot. It'll be your book. All right, turn them in. And you can pack up and head out for lunch.
Stand up. Stand up. Wait around.
Hey, Matt, thanks, Matt.